for the recording, and also I don't know Li-Ping, so I'll introduce myself and then I'll introduce our panel. So I'm Julia Chamberlain, and I am in the Department of French and Italian, but I'm on the French side. And I've been here for a very long time. In fact, so long that I have never actually been on a job market. I was actually hired at a cafe in Santa Monica. So that kind of tells you how the world has changed so much, because today the hiring is so, it's a big process. So that's kind of why we decided to start this series, is to help out our graduate students who are on the job market, because it can be, I imagine, because I've not ever done it, that it's a very difficult and stressful process. So since I don't really have much, I've only been on hiring committees, I've never been on the market, I'll go ahead and introduce our panel, and then we can get started. So our first faculty member is Margaret Rosenthal, who goes by Tita. And she's the chair of French and Italian, and she's on the Italian side, and she's been on numerous hiring committees over the years, both for language and for research positions, more research heavy positions as well. Would you
so I want to say that in preparing for this talk, for this panel, I actually had the opportunity to go to two panels in the last couple of weeks. One is in my field of research, which is Renaissance. And I saw that they were having a panel on interviewing. And I thought, okay, since it's been an extremely long time since I've actually interviewed for a position in Italian, I thought I'd go and listen to what they had to say. And so I learned quite a bit. And then also Olivia Harrison in my department had a wonderful round table where she brought back alums who now have university positions in French or Comp Lit or other fields. And so I listened to what they had to say. So that kind of brought me back into sort of the current time. So I really enjoyed it. So I look forward to sharing some thoughts when we have that opportunity.
That's wonderful, because that'll kind of balance this out a little bit. So when we were thinking of this, it was through the Center for Languages and Cultures. We were kind of thinking of it just being sort of targeted for teaching of languages, because some posts have research and language teaching. Some posts are only language teaching, some posts are only research. So it's good to have your perspective. And hopefully in the future, we'll be able to sort of meld things together a little bit better and do that. But this is kind of a last minute thing. Mm-hmm. So we've also got James here, who is also on the Italian side. He's the director of the basic language program in Italian. And James, you've been here for a while, but I remember you had a hiring process as well. So let's see.
Yeah, so I arrived here at USC in 2012. I actually was on the job market the last couple years while I was finishing up my PhD at University of Chicago. So I do recall those terrifying experiences. And most recently, though, I've been able to participate in some hiring committees. So last year we hired for a part-time instructor, and then we were able to hire for a full-time instructor as well. And so I looked over all of my notes and the questions that we asked and the different dossiers. And so I hope to have some good information for you guys.
Awesome. And Yishin is here. She's the director of Chinese. You've been on hiring committees, I imagine, as well.
Yes, but I'm here to
support.
Observe. I'm actually,
okay,
not a panelist.
Double checking.
I'm here to support. Yes.
Super.
Sure,
okay, great. We've also got Yushi, and Yushi is a new hire. This is her first semester here at USC. So she is in the Chinese language program, and so she's new to Los Angeles, new to.
Yes. Well, I think Yishen is a person to hire me, so maybe she's know more about me how to do this process. Yeah, so I'm thank you for inviting. Well, hope I can provide more information to the graduate students. And well, I think I have taught in North America several years in different universities. So probably I can provide any some like a success or like a fail experience to students, well, to prevent like tragedy happen again. Yeah, thank you.
Prevent tragedy. I like that. And, and finally, we have Brady, who is also a new hire, and he is in Arabic. So anyway, so Brady, do you have?
No, I'm sure I'll talk more about my experience later,
Great.
but thanks for letting me be here.
Oh, I thank you all. That is very kind of you all to give up your own time and to come help us. So I'll open it up. Since we're small enough, I think we can just, open it up this way. I don't know if Rich, Erica, or Li Ping, if you have any questions you want to start with. Go ahead, Rich, do you?
Yeah. Sorry, it's crazy to me that I'm like, where's the raise your hand function? Do I still not know how to use Zoom? But thanks all of you as Julia said, giving your time and your thoughts to people that are on the job market. My question's kind of broad, but I wonder if maybe some people who are maybe on the market a little bit more recently might be able to give me some advice. Probably as some of you find yourself in the same position, but I'm applying to both language teaching intensive positions and research positions. And although I've been working on making some materials like my teaching statement and my letter for the language teaching intensive jobs stronger, I still feel like those materials are weaker than the materials I'm using for research jobs. So I'm wondering maybe what you found useful in terms of letters that actually got an interview, what information you thought was key in developing a successful letter for language positions.
I can start.
Yeah.
I was in a similar experience. So I did my PhD at UCLA, and my research is on modern Arabic literature. But essentially the entire time I was a graduate student there, I was teaching Arabic. And so I have a couple thoughts on that. I don't know, since I'm new, I don't really know the sort of career advising opportunities and resources at USC, but at UCLA, they were very focused on research positions. And I think we're kind of just getting around to the fact that most of the job opportunities are not tenure track positions, or none are not postdocs. And so many students who didn't necessarily train for language teaching positions are going to end up in those jobs if they can sell themselves properly. And so what I found helpful was thinking about my CV as being completely different for language positions. So I restructured my entire teaching record, and I separated it out into language teaching and literature teaching. I elevated the teaching positions and downgraded, or the teaching categories, and downgraded the research, even though that's what they tell you not to do. I'm not being paid to be a researcher. I'm paid to teach language. And I also was very explicit to link any sort of activities in terms of, so I had other language related jobs or language related professional development that I highlighted in my statement. But one thing that I would also add is that I think that in my case, I know that one reason I was hired at USC was because I also am qualified to teach literature classes, and that gave the department flexibility in terms of what courses I would be able to teach. So I'm teaching a GE right now because our enrollment is too low for the language classes. And so I still had the couple sentences about my research and my dissertation, and that happened to be a very good fit for the type of approach that our department takes in terms of their content courses. So I think it is important not to forget that you spent the last couple years writing a dissertation. And if they are looking for someone who is a specialist in second language acquisition, then you're not going to be that person.
Brady, what professional development did you do that was based on your language teaching?
So I was on a fellowship for 1 year, and I used some money to go to the University of Alexandria to do like a workshop in the communicative method. But it was at the University of Alexandria in Egypt. And that was a nice credential that I could say I have this letter of recommendation. I know these people, I was in this institution. But what was more important was that I could point to something where I said I have the theoretical background in communicative language teaching. And I could go into details about the sorts of materials that I had developed, which you don't necessarily need to have done like an intensive workshop for a month or two in order to have those materials and have that experience and have that theoretical knowledge. You just basically have to know how to speak the language of the discipline.
Yeah, and I can say that for French, we have lots, there are lots of those. You can go to France for, I did a month long this last summer in Tours, and you can do up to a week all the way up to a month. And those kinds of things really do. I don't know for the other, I don't know for Italian or for any other language, but I do know that in French that we have lots of those. Tita, did you have your hand up? Oh, Tita, I think you're on mute.
No,
Nope.
can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. So Brady, thank you for that. It was very interesting what you said. And Richard, your question. This is what I think. One, I think if we step back for a moment and think about the positions that you're applying, and as you say, Richard, they're multiple, you have to ask yourself, am I answering the questions that they are going to have? So the one thing that you don't want to have happen is that you're going to leave open questions in their minds, in the department or faculty's minds, as to whether or not, well, is he going to be or is she going to be happy being a language instructor only? And will I be faced with a position of a person who really is grounded in research and sees themselves in that way, and therefore they're really not fitting the needs of my department? So when you write your cover letter, you have to imagine a situation where you are answering any kind of potential questions like that, because you're going to be immediately put aside if you are not very direct and explicit about this. And so the first thing I would say is, if you have the opportunity to do this, really research the school that you're and the department that you're looking at. And what you want to look for are the holes in that department. Like, why are they looking for someone in this position? What do you think? Of course, you can't mind read and all that, but you study the department, figure out what is it that they might want that is beyond what they're telling you in the job description. And if you come away from that, Richard, and you think that they really are looking for a dual kind of position, that they're really looking for someone who can do language, as Brady was talking about, and literature by virtue of the fact that Brady's doing a GSA. If you think that that's really the case, then you really need to speak about it explicitly. That this is something that you can do willingly, wanting to, that this is the way you define yourself. And so my suggestion then is that, because they're going to be asking, another question they'll ask themselves is this person going to fit in to our department well? Is this person someone who we can imagine having for a long time with us, who can grow and change and transform and all those kinds of things, But if they're not really happy at the very, very beginning, they're not going to ever really be. And so when you write your letter, I agree with Brady. It's really got to be very much, it's got to be full in both areas. If that's what you determine, that you determine the department really is looking for her person who can do both language teaching and research. If you determine that that's what they're really looking for, then you really do need to look at yourself and ask yourself, can I give a very full picture of my language teaching that would be concomitant with my research, and that both are going to be highly valuable, and that I'm the candidate for them. And I would also suggest, and I'll shut up, I don't want to take too much of time, but I would also suggest that you tell us a kind of a story of yourself. So a story of you as a language teacher, and a narrative of you as a teacher of literature. Come up with a story about what kind of narratives you tell when you teach these classes. You know, what is your bigger picture? What are the things that you're really concerned about that the students take away, so that they can see you as a colleague, as someone who has a vision of where you are now, but that with the limited experience that you've had in teaching, but where you imagine going with it. And it's that kind of sort of step out of the graduate student mentality, the postdoc mentality, towards the colleague mentality. I'm going to be your new colleague, and this is how I'm going to help you in your department.
Great.
I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think that's true. You know, having been on hiring committees, it is true that the person's going to be with us probably for a very long time. So you definitely want to be able to see that person as, you know, a member of your department. Yeah, James.
Yeah, so I agree with everything that Brady and Tita have said thus far. I would also add that keep in mind that, you know, these committees are receiving, you know, 100 applications, right? I mean, we receive so many applications. And so, you know, when we're looking through them, we're trying to figure out ways to sort. And in the recent search that we did, you know, one way of sorting was, is their heart in language instruction, or are they presenting themselves this way? But really, there are lots of indications that that's not the case. So I definitely think that it is worth your time to, you know, to have, as Brady suggested, to have like 2 sets of materials, 3 sets of materials. I agree entirely with what Tita said about, you know, researching the department and seeing how you fit into that. You know, some questions that we asked then during the actual interview was, you know, why are you the best candidate for this position? So really think through that, and, you know, be modest, but, you know, definitely have some specifics to say about why you're the best candidate. Another thing, and this is something that Tita's already touched on, but, you know, your ability to collaborate with colleagues is essential. We're looking for, you know, team players, right? People who can work together. And so you need to present yourself that way. Another thing that we saw as a weakness, honestly, we would ask very probing questions to see if they would express, you know, sort of, let's say, less than ideal, you know, relationships with their colleagues or with their students. I really recommend you be sincere, but spin things positively, right? So, I mean, like, honestly, when you know, talk about a difficult group of students that you've worked with, say things like, there are always challenges, but I like to rise to the challenge. I mean, always frame things in very positive ways, because as soon as we, you know, had this sort of understanding that, ooh, that didn't go so well, and they're placing all of the, you know, the blame on the group of students, we didn't pursue that candidate anymore, you know? So, I mean, like, this is definitely something you really want to frame everything in really positive ways, as if you're up for the challenge. And yeah, so sincerity is the only other thing that I would add. Be sincere, because you can, we're all close readers. We're trained to be close readers, and we know when, you're not being sincere. So make sure that you do that. Lastly, I think this is also really, really essential. We all want to grow our numbers, right? We all want to strengthen our programs, and put some time and energy into reflecting on how you would do that. Don't give the boring, run-of-the-mill ideas, and if a program is already doing really great things, like here at USC, we really do work hard. And so like in Italian, we have, Italian for speakers of Spanish and other Romance languages, which is an accelerated course. We have, an internship for our students who have completed third semester of Italian. I wanted to see if somebody had something that I hadn't thought of yet. And so really, if you put some time into that and you come up with a couple of things, they're going to love it.
Yeah, actually, James, what you said is really important, because that we have courses like there are courses Spanish for the professions, French for the professions, for like medical French and legal French and business French. And those, if your department doesn't have those, and that's something you're interested in, I mean, obviously, if you're not interested in anything about, medicine, you're not going to want to do that, because like James says, you do want to be very sincere. But those are sort of examples of things that you could, also with like what James said, add in as something you could add to the course if you're interested in doing that.
Yeah, and give always concrete examples. So it's not a question of just saying, oh, that's something I would really enjoy. And no, you're going to say, and Richard, you've taught, so you could say, I've taught this class, and these are the things that I would like to teach again. And this is the reason why I think, I'm, with all humility, I'm the person to do it. Because departments are wanting to fill the gaps in their curriculum. They're wanting to fill the places, and they're really looking for coverage. And they want that coverage, and they want to think that the person coming in as a colleague ready to jump right in right away into providing that kind of coverage. And so once again, I would just support what James says. I do really believe, though, that in being modest, don't go overboard. Be modest, be gracious. And if you're asked something in an interview and you don't know, you say you don't know, but you will look out into it and find out and get back to them. But it's very important that they see you at your very best, see you as the person who they are going to imagine working with and being with for years to come.
Can I just, I'm sorry, can I just say two other things? I would also say, especially for language positions, you really do need to, have your own language down well, right? So be able to speak the language that you're planning on teaching. And I know this sounds kind of ridiculous, but like we did have a lot of candidates, and their Italian was not very strong at all. And unfortunately, that kind of ruled them out. So if that is something, if you're not a native speaker, continue to work on your language, talk about, what you're doing to work on your language, because that is definitely really important. And the last thing I would say, though, is ACTFL. The beauty of being at USC is that all of the language instructors, we all do ACTFL OPI training on some level. We are all sort of aware of this. And, even if you don't do, the actual training, I mean, at least familiarize yourself with, ACTFL and how that all works and proficiency and everything, because we're all looking for people who understand how that works, and that really sets you apart.
Yeah, actually what James is saying is right. That's that language that we speak as colleagues is the language of ACTFL. Sorry, Yishi, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. I really agree with all you said before. But when I remember someone told me before, it just like what do you say? I think there's some tips I really need to mention about it from my experience. Like practice is very important. for example, like you said about writing the CV or teaching statement or some research achievement, something. Well, first is to be honest, just like Margaret said, and to give some example, the concrete example. Because I think the 100 candidate, you ask the same question, they will give you, oh, I'm really interested about that. I'm like this, I have a patience, enthusiasm, but if you give it a concrete example, that would be different. So I think the point is how to let the community interested in the person who you are. Yeah, so not just a paper or an interview, how to let them interested about your experience, your background, and they want to know more about your research, your instructions. And one more thing is like, for my experience, like I would suggest if you prepare to write the CV or the calculator first, you can collect some like questions or like collect some information. What do they want, and what usually they will ask in the interview, because when you collect some questions, you can prepare. Well, I think I heard a lot of people, even me, the same. When we do the interview, we was just scared and terrified and too nervous. So we performed not very well. So I would suggest practice. Find someone to practice, or like practice with yourself. Let the word speak out, and let your answer to show who you are. Yeah, because a lot of the candidates, they know a lot. They have a lot of professional knowledge, but when you ask them something, they just stop it. So if you read it before the interview, if you read your CV, any like information document you provide, and you can just point out, oh, this idea, this conception is in my calculator or like teaching statement. You can look at that, refer to that. They will say, oh, you prepare very well. You know what you're doing. That's what I experienced. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely sign up for the mock interviews we're doing on November 11th, because I always believe that if you've practiced, just like she was saying, if you practice, you'll do better. Brady?
Yeah, I'm sorry, these kind of came in response to the other answers, but I want to make sure that I get this out as well. One thing that was helpful for me was to imagine what is the paper trail that I'm giving the committee, because I want to make sure at the very least that I get the interview. And so one like important thing for me is thinking about the institutional or personal connections that are coming through so that I seem like a legitimate candidate. So if you have, what I mean is like the letters of recommendation, for example. I chose to have my committee chair write a letter of recommendation so that it was clear that I had his support in this job and that it wasn't like me being a renegade, even though he's a literature person. He's worked with me for the past 6 years. But then I had 2 letters of recommendation from people who I didn't take courses with, but who were well respected nationally or internationally as teachers, as people who are very invested in language teaching, and who could speak to me as a language teacher. And I think that's really important, because just as you would want the really great researcher on your postdoc or your tenure track position applications, you need those people, to stand up for you in the language teaching jobs as well. And the other thing that I would say is that I was asked to provide lots of documentation after my first interview. Actually, it may have been it was before my first interview, actually. So I was asked to give past tests that I had written, written feedback on student work, materials. I was submitting like supplementary materials and activities that I had used in my courses before the interview, and those were also things that I referenced in my cover letter, because you need to give them a sense that you're someone who is actively contributing to the program, that you're not just taking a textbook and using drills. And I think if you can clearly link that you produce curriculum, even if it's just supplementary activities or materials, in a way that speaks the language of ACTFL and proficiency, I think that's really important. It's not just that I'm creative and I use songs, but I use songs in a way that is aligned with actual pedagogical principles.
Brady, how did you get letters, a recommendation from those nationally known faculty members? Did you
Well,
send them?
I was just lucky so I had one in my department, a professor of Arabic who ran our language program, or he in name, so he supervised it, but he was not a language instructor in the program, but he carries weight in the field. And so I knew that people on the committee, if they knew anything about teaching Arabic, would know him. And his recommendation would be meaningful. And the other person was from Alexandria.
I have a kind of a suggestion, because I think that's a great idea. So, you know, I can only speak for the French side, but for example, we could find someone who is nationally known, and you could send a recording of one of your classes to that person, so that that person would have an idea of your teaching. That's one of the advantages of having been on Zoom, is now we know we can record our classes and anyone can see them and make comments. Ishan, did you have a question?
To respond to the reference letters, so one thing, at least for ELC, the struggle of our students is we actually don't have that many AL positions, so they don't get to teach in their home institution. So what I would suggest is, you know, as graduate students, you can go out to seek summer teaching job, the intensive language programs, and try to get in prestigious one. You can go to Middlebury, Concordia, and those are also nationally recognized directors. They can write very good letter if you work with them the whole summer. That's where you will get your good language, good letters that speaking your language teaching abilities.
That's great.
So may I say, if we can go back actually to a very practical issue, I would like to go back to the cover letter and say a couple things about that. And this is going to sound very sort of school marmish or whatever, but the letters has to be flawless. No typos, no mistakes in language, do not go beyond the page limits. It is what gets set the course for you. Because if you're getting 200 applications and you see a messy letter with just typos or some, you know, just not well written, it'll be set aside right from the very beginning. So just you know, make sure that that's true of your letter. Make sure it's true of your CV. That it just is flawless, and there's nothing that they can hold you accountable for there, because you won't make it to the next step. And then the other thing is that you know, well, maybe this has more to do with the interview. I'll just say quickly, you know, clearly, as has been said, the interview has to be practice with your friends, as Yuchi said, and particularly because a lot of interviews are going to be done on Zoom these days. So you have to go over, make sure your tech support, not that you have fancy equipment, but just that everything's working, and that they can see you full face, that it's bright, it's pleasant, you're not in the darkness, you know, all those kinds of things. They can hear you well, you know, wear earbuds, make sure you get good sound across, or some kind of amplifying. those are just really, really good. Those are moments where it can just start off on the wrong foot right away. And as Brady says, have Zoom on your phone, just have everything ready in the case in the case that something malfunctions. It's really crucial. And then one last thing I'd like to say about this with regard to research, Richard, is there somewhere in the cover letter and then also in the interview, you'll be asked to talk about your dissertation and what it was about and all of that. And I would highly recommend that you go beyond saying what the dissertation is and say why it matters. And because that's what they really want to know. In other words, as do most people who are listening, they don't want to just hear what you did. They want to hear why we should care about it and why your students would care about it and how it's going to actually color the kind of and inform the kind of classes that you teach because of why it mattered, And so I would put your emphasis in talking a little bit about that.
That's great. Yeah. Do you guys have
And
other
maybe-
questions? Go ahead.
Sorry. I'm sorry, I really agree with what Tita said, especially about cover letter. It really has to be flawless. And the other thing I want to add on is your email communication with the committee. Somebody send an unprofessional email, immediately red flag it, because I do not want to see that email coming out of my language program or ELC go to the other colleagues in the other department, because at that point they represent the program and the department. So that's something that I definitely look out for, like sometimes when you see unprofessional emails. So
Oh, that's great. Li Ping, do you have a question?
Yes, so hi everyone, I'm from Compass, so hi Rich. And also I'm now a teaching postdoc at East Asian Studies, and then Yishen is actually one of my mentors for language teaching. So so happy to hear from all of you, and also great suggestions, making a lot of notes here. And I have one thought and also one questions that I want to kind of gather you guys' thoughts. So the first one is, more and more positions, especially in the liberal arts college, they are asking for language teaching plus like cultural class teaching. So it's a one position have two different dimension for teaching. And so actually what I do is saying that, my research can help me, not only teach the content course, but also to teach the language course, to integrate culture, for example, literatures and why not. So especially for the advanced cultural class. So I think this is something that at least in the Chinese study and the Chinese language program, that, to be able to teach culture in addition to language, and especially for the advanced level ones. So I think that's definitely something that could be the way, how we frame our research. So our research inform our teaching, language teaching as well. And so this is something that I just kind of want to share, that I'm also in that, like, oh, how do I frame my research, but for cultural teaching, language teaching as well. And then, so my question is about, so it's actually from the first step when the faculty, when the committees, they got all these applications. And I just want to know that how things got decided and then the process to eventually narrow down to 10 to 12 people. So I know that all the information will be shared by the committee members. I know cover letters and CV are maybe one of the most important documents, but what's next? Because for the teaching position, they ask a lot of things, teaching statement, diversity, and I was asked to submit lesson plans, simple syllabus, teaching evaluation. So there's a lot of things. So I guess every material is important, I should say that, but I guess just want to hear what you guys think in terms of letters and CV, and what other materials we should put extra attention to.
I don't really think I can answer this because our last two hires have been kind of last minute. And so it was kind of a scramble. So I think maybe Yishen, James, or Tita, maybe you could.
James?
Well, I think both Yishen and Tita have mentioned a couple of things that I'd like to sort of emphasize. How do you say that?
Emphasize.
Excellent. So when we request materials and we receive applications that are incomplete, you know, it's again another way of sorting on some level, right? So, you know, you just don't want to, you know, put up any red flags basically. And so, like, for instance, when you communicate with the department, like Yixing said, be really careful in how you're doing that. Make sure that your emails are thoughtful, and maybe don't ask even too many questions, you know, like ask the right amount of questions, but don't, you know, then sort of portray yourself as if, you know, oh, this person is going to require a lot of work to work with on some level, right? So, I mean, I think what you really want to do is you want to make sure that you know, you provide them with everything that they're asking for, and that you know, be as thorough as possible, and you be careful in not raising any sort of red flags while you're doing it. I mean, I think like that's the best advice that I can give you, because again, whenever I would receive an incomplete application, or I would receive, for instance, you know, CVs that are in a format that's more consistent with the European Union and not the United States. These were always ways that the committee and I were able to kind of sort, and we were able to kind of, you know, sort of bring down the amount of applications that we really had to, you know, seriously consider. So I think that all of that needs to be put out there. I don't know if I'm answering your question. Sorry. Sorry.
Go ahead, Tita.
So I have a thought, Liping. When you were talking about your the fact that you work in culture and language and that they inform one another, that's a very good premise. But what was missing in what you said was that you didn't give any examples. So what I would say, there are going to be many, many people who are going to say the same thing that you just said. Okay. But what you have to say is something they've never heard before. Okay, I mean, do you know what I'm saying? You have to say something that's going to make them remember you, because you've had some particular experience doing exactly what you're talking about. So you don't want to talk in generalities. You want to talk in specifics. And even if you haven't had the opportunity to teach as much as like you said, as explaining, it hasn't happened. Even if you haven't, you can speak about the kind of course that you would teach doing that, but you give at least 3 examples of something. In other words, they won't go away asking themselves, well, how is she going to do that? Well, we'll just ask her in an interview. No, you tell them. And then they can follow up with in the interview, well, you said such and such, could you tell us some more? Okay.
That's great. Yeah, go ahead.
I think I could the Chinese program. I has a lot of experience about that. Well, as you say, you don't know, you provide a lot of the material, and you just send out and do whatever they requested. What is the next? Well, I think I would like to provide the experience like about focus on the ourselves. Is like what I learned is like a different university, different program. They're looking for a different type of teacher. So some university, they want to find a position. This position is for research position, but including teaching. Some position, they just want to find a good teacher, good teaching. Yeah, and so what I've and some position looking for like who has a permanent residence and can just stay forever. Yeah, so I think to be the candidate, we couldn't pursue, imagine or like ask for lots of what can I do? Well, I think it's like just move on. So what I experienced, like just fix every your material every time after one like well, application, you send it and get some feedback from them. And also, if you think about what is next, you will just stop yourself and spend too much time to do it. I think that I agree with a lot professors, all professors says, just move on. What make you outstanding? What distinguishes yourself from other candidates? And keep doing that, keep move on. So that will make you a specific person, and anyone that is become your feature. So then sometimes good opportunities need to wait. So even you fail this time, but do whatever you just try harder, and also don't give up. And that is the hint. And you will find the best position is waiting for you. The best job opportunity is waiting for you. If you stop here, then everything just down. Yeah.
Yishan, did you have something?
Yeah, so in response to Li Ping's question, so what's next, right? I think it's very difficult to tell what is the most important document, because every program, when they go into search, they have some expectation in mind. Even the same language program at different time, they have to hire different type of people. Sometimes when my program is has more people that need mentoring, then I want to bring in a more senior person that already very established, have many, teaching job experiences everywhere in US. Sometimes when my program can afford it, I want to bring a really potential superstar and then kind of groom them. So it's just so hard to tell which one is the document to focus on. But I agree with Yuqi, you just have to do your best on all of them.
Brady?
Yeah, one thing that we haven't spoken about much is like a diversity statement, or and one thing that I have found is that what is asked for in terms of a diversity statement really varies based on the position, and that institutions use those materials in really different ways. But I don't think it's something that you can afford to overlook or to treat as secondary, because you don't know how it's being used by the committee. And so this is always the most challenging thing for me to write about, because I don't often think of my teaching as being about like diversity or equity or inclusion, at least not in like the terms that we're used to talking about it in sort of public discourse. And so I think you really have to think about what is a sincere way to reflect on your teaching, especially language teaching. How are you engaged with those issues? And giving examples, I have found, is the only way that I am able to talk about those things without just speaking platitudes, right? Because anyone can say anything, but if you don't have a story or a concrete example to back it up, then it reads as being disingenuous, and it doesn't really hold any weight. And again, maybe the committee is not really invested in this. You don't know who the 4 or 5 people on the committee are. Maybe it's just an institutional requirement, but maybe it's an institution that is really invested in this, and it will disqualify you if you're not sort of up to snuff on that. So that's just what I would say about that.
Yeah, Yuqi.
I have experience about this. I know some like a business trail, sometimes they will write later an email to the committee to ask, what do I need to qualify to you. So actually, what I do before is when I receive a rejected email and say wish you the best in the future, that's hurt. But one of the things, because English is not my native language, and also I'm from Taiwan, so I have no idea about any like North American of the university rounds at that time. So I just asked, well, can you give me? I asked the email to the committee. Can you give me some like advice about my application, what I need, or like how I perform? And fortunately, I was lucky. They replied the email and they point out my mistake. That was hurt, really. It hurt me a lot, but I learned how to do it, like how to write a calculator, how to perform in the interview. That was really lucky. I'm really lucky because usually committee, everyone is busy. No one will reply your email, but they did it. So I really appreciate it. So maybe you can try it. If you really want to know, maybe you can ask them what kind of person you're looking for. And they may impress about your email. And the next time when they open a new position, they will inform you, maybe. That's why I have it before. Thank you.
That's a great idea. Any other questions? Yeah, James?
Yeah, it's not a question, but I guess I would just conclude by saying that, be reasonable as well in what the amount of materials that you send to them. You definitely want to include every piece that they request, but I do recall getting these cover letters that were 4 or 5 pages long, getting just lots and lots of material. And honestly, that worked against the candidate about as much as if somebody were to give very, very short responses. So be reasonable and make sure that everything you offer is quality. I think that's important.
That's true.
I
Erica?
totally agree with that. Do not go beyond the page limit.
Exactly. Erica, do you have a question?
Yes, I wanted to ask, actually, it was very interesting in what Yuchis just said, because it was a question I wanted to ask, namely if it is, so to say, normal or it is possible to email committee before the application is due, or if, I don't know, it's better not to contact committees because, I don't know, maybe be seen as incorrect in some levels. I don't know, I had just this question. And another question was about the CV, because I am in the Slavic field, and what I noticed from some of the professors that I interacted with is that, for instance, their CVs actually have very different formats. So I kind of have a question as to how a good CV is supposed to be structured.
I can answer your first question. When our last search, someone sent numerous emails to the chair of the committee, and it was overkill, and it really worked against that person because we're very busy, and so you don't want to annoy them because then they're going to think, what kind of colleague are you going to be? Are you going to be a super needy colleague? So I would say no to that. But for your second question, I'll let someone else.
So, Erica, I would ask your department chair to provide you with a CV that is the appropriate kind of CV to write. And that is what I would do. It's a very important question for you to ask, and it should look standardized, and there is a way to do it and not a way to do it. So it would be an appropriate question. I would also agree, I would not connect to the committee and ask the question. I understand you, Chi, why you did, and I appreciate it, but I think it could backfire. I think it's a huge risk I would not take. That's just my opinion.
Well, I say that because well, I know the chair of the department at
Oh,
that time. Yeah,
That makes sense.
sorry about
Okay,
that.
okay, that's a very
Yeah.
different, that's a different
Yeah,
story. You
sorry
didn't
about
tell
that,
us that.
yeah.
You didn't tell
Yeah,
us that.
sorry. Only
But,
one time I do that, but usually we don't write an email to the committee. Don't
No.
disturb them. Yeah,
No.
yeah. But that
Well,
just
you-
that case is like they decide another like a better candidates, and that's already done. So I just want to ask for the help, just so I'll ask what I need before. But usually we don't do that. Yeah. Yeah, but if you know the committee, you can maybe you can ask for the like some like a suggestion to like revise your your paper, your document, yeah, or like how you perform. Yeah, sorry about this. Sorry.
Great. Does anyone have any other questions? No? Well, first of all, I would like to encourage all of the graduate students to not only sign up for the mock interviews, but also to sign up to have your cover letter reviewed by some faculty. We have a number of faculty members who are ready and willing to look over them and to kind of focus in on the language teaching aspects of it. So I definitely recommend you do that. It's you can find those links on the email I sent yesterday, which has a link to the website where you can find all of this. And I want to say thank you to all of the faculty members who took time out of their busy schedules to come and help us with this. And thank you again. And I will see you all around campus.
Well done, Julia.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very good.
Thank
Very
you.
nice. Nicely done.
Thanks. Hey, Evgeny. Evgeny, are you still there? No? Okay. See you later.